So they've rebranded it, retitled it, but it's the same thing, okay? And they do admit that they're real. Now, they don't admit that they're men from Mars, but what they do admit, that includes U.S. senators, congressmen, high government officials, the military. They say, look, we don't know what they are, but we do know that they're not ours, and we can't explain the movements of them, and we can't track them, we can't fight them, we can't control them. So that's a big deal. Now, what are they? If they're something from China or Russia, we need to find out. If there's something from another planet, we need to find out. Again, because they don't know how to control these. They don't know how to beat these. And if they've got a weapon, a craft, a vehicle that can do these types of things that the U.S. government can't chase, can't track, can't shoot down, that's a national security issue. Now, maybe we should have been looking at this way all along, but we didn't. But now we do. And the other thing about the Hills that I just find amazing is that in 1961, they were an interracial couple. That to me, and they were quiet people. I mean, they were, sure, they served on the board of the NAACP and were into civil rights, but then because they were an interracial couple and she was a social worker, you would think that they would have that type of mindset, that type of thing would be important to them, that they would see it through the eyes that very few people did, and that would be important to them. So other than that, they were a very quiet couple. They did their jobs, they worked hard, they attended their church. And if you think to yourself, why in God's name would they want to bring attention to themselves? Hey, look at us. We're going to tell this weird, bizarre story that had never been made up before. Anything's possible. Anything could have happened. But really, that's not a logical explanation. Now, there's all kinds of explanations by the psychiatrists, by the psychologists, by the military, by the Project Blue Book people, as to what was this? This was something in their imagination. In fact, of course, there's all kinds of explanations. The abduction actually occurred. That's something you have to consider. I mean, maybe it wasn't sleep. I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Sleep deprivation, which can cause people to imagine. They just made it up. Betty had a strong imagination. Barney went along with it. They were fans of The Outer Limits, and they took that story, the Bolero Shield, and they built on it. Hypnosis back then, as mentioned in the stories here, hypnosis back then was a very popular, very accepted way of recalling people's memory. It also lent itself to leading questions. And under hypnosis, leading questions can certainly influence what the individual sees. Today, hypnosis is not really, it's almost discounted most of the time because of leading questions, because of the way the questions are introduced. I mean, you could say, what did you see that day? Or you could say, did you really see alien grays? The whole thing about the aliens being gray, could that have been, okay, Barney's black, Betty's white, white plus black equals gray, and these beings were superior to them. In other words, the underlying thing could have been, look, it's not black, it's not white, it's gray. That's the future. So maybe they were discounting the fact that they were an interracial couple. All things are possible. All kinds of things are possible. But the one thing that just makes absolutely, positively no sense at all is if nothing had happened to these people, if they just made it all up, why would they do that? Why would they want to call? Why would an interracial couple in 1961 want to call attention to something that they did? call attention to themselves, make up a story that was so bizarre, so strange that they would look, wow, look at these people. Oh, and they're an interracial couple. Why would they do that? That part of it makes no sense. So what was it? Sleep deprivation, a vivid imagination, something that was coerced under hypnosis. But of course, there is another explanation, an explanation that's always possible. And that is that the abduction actually occurred. Now, the Hills stuck to their story despite years of skeptics and detractors. Like many abductees, the couple never felt false memory or sleep paralysis explained what they experienced. In fact, in later years, Betty became known as a voice in UFO research and claimed that she was visited multiple times in the decades to follow. Now, Barney died not too long afterwards, 1969, I believe, of a aneurysm or a brain hemorrhage or something like that. But Betty lived well into her 80s, never remarried, and never, ever talked about this being something made up. She stuck with her story for the rest of her life. And unlike the Travis Walton incident, the Hills really never made money off of this, okay? Travis Walton made millions. The Hills made next to nothing. Sure, there was a book written and there were a movie made, and they may have gotten something off that, but they never became rich. They never made a ton of money off of this incident. And to me, that's huge. That's a big deal. Now, let's just say that this is what happened. Let's just say that the incident is real. Let's just say that everything occurred just as Betty and Barney Hill described it. What was it? Was it really beings from another planet? Was it the government actually playing tricks and games to them to go ahead and see what's going on? In other words, maybe they were given hallucinogenic drugs and they were actually probed by the government and thoughts put into their head. A conspiracy theory, for lack of a better word. Maybe that was it. Or another theory, a theory that's becoming more and more popular. And this is based on, okay, these people were from Zeta Reticuli, which takes, I don't know how many thousands of light years they are away. So how can you go ahead and travel from this point to that point? Could the Greys, could these alien abductees, or abductors, I should say, could they just be us many thousands of years into the future? In other words, time travelers. In other words, they're from another era, another time, maybe another dimension. So maybe they're us, but us in a way different form. And they've gone back in time to investigate the way things used to be. Now, some may think that's just ridiculous and that's silly, but consider this. What we do today, if you go back 100 years ago, maybe let's say 200 years ago, not thousands, but 200 years ago. What if 200 years ago you put a cell phone into the hand of the smartest people in the world? They would have no idea what it was. Or a computer. Or a nuclear generator, or countless things that we have today that take for granted, a television, a radio. They would think it's witchcraft. The smartest people in the world would think that from just 200 years ago. What if you extrapolated that 200 years into 2,000 years, 10,000 years? What are we going to be able to accomplish in 2,000 years, in 10,000 years? One thing about people is they're always curious. Wouldn't it be great if we could go back in time 10,000 years and see how people were? You talk about where man evolved. And you can say, well, we evolved as per Darwin from the monkeys, from the apes, from the primates, okay? And while we do have a lot in common with the primates, we're totally different from them. And there's a theory that says that other beings from another time did something different to the monkeys and turned them into us. Now, you could say another being. You could say God. Same thing, same similar story. So if you're a person of faith, you can say God. If you're an atheist, you could say beings from another planet. But when you compare people to apes, there's one big difference that you have to consider. Sure, apes use tools, man uses tools. But apes don't evolve. Apes don't improve. The way apes did things 200 years ago, they do the same thing now. They don't learn to use things differently. They haven't evolved, they haven't improved. Whereas people improve constantly. Sure, apes have figured out how to use a stone to hit a coconut to break it open. But they've been doing it that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. They've never found a way to get a better stone, a better material, a sharper edge, none of that. Whereas man does. So that separates us so totally from other people. So, what caused the Betty and Barney Hill incident? That's for you to decide. My personal opinion, I'm not sure. But I will tell you this, I do not believe they made this up. Because why would an interracial couple want to call attention to themselves and make no money in the process? But that's for you to decide as to where you think this story has gone. Well, that's it. I'm done. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to hear more, go to Spreaker.com. There's all kinds of podcasts on the James Strong Show podcast page. Spreaker.com or iHeartRadio or iTunes, any place you get your podcasts. I just don't do the UFO stuff and the Bigfoot stuff. Last week I interviewed Karen Gunning, who worked with Mother Teresa's nuns in India. Travel shows. We'll do politics every once in a while. News of the day. All kinds of stuff on the James Strong Show podcast for you to enjoy. And send me emails, please. I enjoy discussing with the listeners. I enjoy discussing these podcasts. And I would say every week, every podcast, I get responses, and I love to get them. Well, that's it. I'm done. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Again, you can pick it up anywhere you pick up podcasts, or if you want the podcast delivered to your inbox each and every time they drop, each and every time they're published, send me an email, jamesstrongshow@hotmail.com. That's it. We're done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.